Well, thank you very much, John, for this very generous introduction. I have to thank you and Paul and Tatjana and Irene and the whole center for bringing me here. I love to be here, I must say. I mean, I haven't been here for quite a while. It's so wonderful to be in. This is one of the great intellectual nodes in the world, Stanford, and you have a fantastic campus. This architecture is really enticing. It's very special architecture, and the trees. I mean, there are some trees which are older than any architecture here. It's fantastic, and it's also very appropriate or happy coincidence that you give the 42nd Evan-Swen's lecture, because I was born in 1942. So, did you know that? Well, anyway, I should start writing on mountains to save the world. People tell me the title has to be somewhat enigmatic, so to make the audience slightly curious about what does it mean. But this title is so enigmatic that I myself don't really know what it means. This is the problem when you write a title about almost a year ago when you invited me, and I wrote this title, and then as time came closer and the lecture time approached, I thought, what did I mean? I mean, what is this? I mean, which world are we talking about? Which world? Or is it a present world? Is it a future world? And who does the saving? And I don't know, how did they try to do it? Very obscure to myself, I'm sorry. But one thing is clear. I'm talking about sutras engraved into stone in China. That at least is not ambiguous. And so in order to arrive at some clarity in my mind, I just asked two simple questions. How did these Buddhist inscriptions shape space? I mean, shape means transform, create, manipulate space. And the second simple question is, how did they shape time? Now, so we are going to try to go along those lines. Now, space. They wrote on top of mountains, inside mountains, and moving mountains, and with their writings, moved mountains. Now, let's see what they did on top of mountains. This is the map of Shandong province, and the yellow triangles here, you can see them all over. They mark the 21 sites where the Buddhist engraved sutra texts under the open sky, on the bare rock. And these are amazing monuments. I mean, they only engraved roughly from 560 to 580, but these monuments are one of the great contributions of China to world art. Here we have one of them, Mount Tsulai. I'm sorry, maybe I should say this is Mount Tsulai is here. So Mount Tsulai is one of the mountains where the inscriptions were placed on top. And you see this little rock here, or rather large rock, here from afar and now from near. This is the rock. And on this rock is engraved a 98-character passage. It's taken from the Sutra on the Great Perfection of Wisdom spoken by Manju Shri. And this text describes, in this text, the Buddha defines Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom, which is his true nature. And from here, high up on the mountain, the Buddha's message emanates far over the land. Another example is here on Mount E, the peak of Mount E. Here is another inscription, but the characters, of course, are so small you cannot see them from afar, unlike this side, which you can see from afar. But when you come up, then you come close to this inscription. It's actually lying. It's actually engraved down here. It's hard to see. You cannot really see it, but it's here, and as again the force emanates over the land. And another third example. This is the mountain top of Mount Tao, and here are inscriptions. They're engraved here is again the Prajnaparamita, Bolo Bolo Mujing, Bolo Bolo Mi, and it is a definition. It is not a definition. It's just the concept itself, prajna, and you see it better here on the rubbing. And it's aligned together with two Buddha names, Amitofo, Guanyin Fo. So that means the prajna is like a Buddha name. It's like a figure. So this is what the actually art history can tell us. I mean, how these engravings are arranged. They are parallel, they are treated like a Buddha name. And you have to climb up to that mountain to see this. I'm so glad, as you said, I'm so glad that we can work in China now, you know. It's fantastic. When I was a student here, as you mentioned, in '69, it seemed almost as if I would never be able to go to China. I mean, Germans were not allowed to go to China, and China was completely closed, and it has changed so dramatically, and it has changed all our lives. I mean, China scholar. Now, anyway, we can go up to this mountain, and again, the power of the inscription emanates over the land. But now I'll show you still another example. So we have seen Mount Tao just here, and now we are going to Mount Tie, which is here. And Mount Tie, again, we have the inscription on top of the mountain, but here it is spaced. This mountain says explicitly, the colophon says explicitly that it is spaced in a pivotal spot. And I'll show you this in a minute, but first let's look at the sutra. The sutra has the shape of a stele, and this is any stele, like maybe 4 meters high or something like that. And this sutra here on Mount Tie is laid on the mountain like a stele. It lies on this mountain like a stele. And it's about 60 meters from here to here, or from here to here, rather. And here you can see some of the characters. They are not so easy to see. I mean, they have been under the open sky for a millennium and a half. But you can see them. And here we have a diagram. We just saw this spot here, and this is a diagram with the stele. It's supported by 2 tortoises here, and it has a stele head here, and this is surmounted by dragons, which are here. Now, this diagram also shows the main field of the sutra, and then colophons 1, 2. I mean, this is the main field, number 1, then colophon number 2, 3, and 4. I'll just talk about colophon number 2. This is probably the largest colophon in China that was ever done in China. It's 17 meters in length, and it has an exact date, 23rd of September 579. Now, the characters of this colophon, like all the others, are effaced. I mean, as you saw, and one method we use to see them and to photograph them is work at night with strong flashlight from the side, and you can see characters even better than in the daytime. And here the 4 people or 3 or 4 people make a rubbing of this colophon. I mean, if one person does it, it would take too much time. And we had once an exhibition in the Cologne Museum in 2009, and we hung this rubbing from the ceiling. So we hung these rubbings from the ceiling. It's like the Book of the Sky by Xu Bing. We got this idea actually from him to hang. Now, this colophon talks about the crossing of the cosmic space, which I mentioned. The inscription, the Tieshan inscription, is at the crossing of 2 axes. And the colophon says, oh yeah, here is Tie, Mount Tie, and it talks about Mount E. We saw already Mount E. At the top of Mount E, it talks about Mount E, and then it talks also in the north about Mount Tai. So it says about Mount E, it says, ahead one can see Mount E rising majestically and can make out its peak reaching the Milky Way. Mount E here is 11 kilometers away from Mount Tie, and then the colophon continues turning around. One can look in the distance at the looming magnificence of Mount Dai and gaze towards the sacred mountain parting the clouds. So this here is Mount Tie. You see this stele lying here. And actually, from Mount Tie, one cannot see Mount Dai, I mean Taishan, but from Mount Gang, which is slightly behind it, one can see Mount Tai. And this is 98 kilometers away, but if there is a clear day, you can see it. And we checked it with Google Earth. I mean, there is no obstruction in between. You could really, when you're lucky, you could see Mount Tai. Now, of course, Mount E in the south and Mount Tai in the north are famous mountains in Chinese history. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, erected 2 of the steles that commemorated his unification of the empire on these 2 mountains. And so these mountains are nodes in a grand historical and political network. And now the Buddhists are making use of the status and power of these mountains and adapting them to their own purposes. When the Buddhists engrave sutras on these mountains, we saw on Mount E and on Mount Tai, they engraved a large sutra. Now, if they do this, they place these, or they use the authority of these mountains and put them into their own realm. And this north-south axis from Mount Tai over through Mount Tie down to Mount E, this gives stability to their land. Then the colophon writer still defines an east-west axis, and he says, furthermore, to the left, Zhang Cliff comes into view. This should be here somewhere, and there is a hypothesis which mountain Zhang Cliff is. And then he says to the right, here one overlooks the post stations. Zhang Cliff is not as prominent as Mount E and Tai, and the post stations are the least conspicuous of the markers of these 4 cardinal directions. Nevertheless, Mount Tie marks a crossing point where a major north-south axis and a minor east-west axis intersect. And such cosmic crossing points this is not the only one we see in China. And the most prominent crossing point today is, of course, Tiananmen Square, where Mao's mausoleum in the center and the 2 axes cross. The one large axis from the throne of the imperial hall of the emperor's throne goes south through the city and then through the entire country, so to speak, and through the world. And it is crossed by this smaller east-west axis of Chang'an-tie, which leads to the mountains here in the west. Now, this was the first part, and we come now to the second part, inside mountains. In the first part, we talked about these sutras. They like billboards on top of mountains, and they imbue the land with their religious force. And now I'll show you some texts which are hidden inside the mountains. And then, when the monks did this, they observed geomantic rules. And of course, we all know the system of geomancy, wind and water, in English, a general concept of dealing with landscape. And all the Chinese were conscious of the inherent forces that are constantly at work in geographical formations, must be reckoned with. And accordingly, in the natural environment, they identified appropriate locations for buildings, including palaces and monasteries and tombs. This is such a tomb, a random example from a modern booklet on geomancy showing the Fenyi County and this tomb of the Chancellor Yan Sung, who died 1567. Geomancers consider such a site as appropriate. It is sheltered with mountains in the rear, 3 mountain chains, and there is an expanse of water here, a lake in the front. And in the inside, the kernel is this tomb. And here is this woodblock, here is a map of Mount Hongding. And Hongding turned around by 90 degrees, and it's hidden here. Also, the inscriptions are hidden here, and they are also in 2 V-shaped mountain ridges surrounded by this one and in the larger one. And on the opposite side is a lake. So these inscriptions are hidden like in a womb, protected in a womb. And if you want to go there, you feel it's a secluded place, like a paradise almost. You have to go, or you can go through this like Taoyuanming's paradise, peach blossom spring, where you enter into a cave. But here, if you go on, there are no peaches, but barren mountains. And in there, somewhere, are the inscriptions. This is a digital reconstruction of the northern side of this valley, and engraved here is once more the 98 character passage which we already saw on Mount Sulai and on Mount Yi, and it's taken from the Sutra on the Great Perfection of Wisdom spoken by Manjushri, and in which the Buddha describes Prajna Paramita, which is his true nature. And this time I will quote some of it. Here I start from here, the second line. The Buddha said, Prajna Paramita is without boundary. And here, without boundary, and without born, without name, without attributes, Wu Xiang, without attributes, it's inconceivable, without refuge, without sandbank, and without sin, without merit, without obscurity, without illumination. Here, without illumination. And then it goes on, I don't read this, but obviously this is very negative and paradoxical definition of the Buddha himself. And what do you do with it? You meditate on it. In order to understand this, you meditate on it. And directly beneath this inscription, this is the inscription of which we just saw the rubbing, there is a stone bench. It takes the shape of a rectangular couch. And somebody meditating on this stone seat has the characters right in front of his eyes. And he doesn't need to read them, I think, because he knows them by heart anyway. He sits, of course, like Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma we know, the patriarch of the Chan school, who for 9 years practiced Biguan, wall contemplation. And there are several famous paintings. This is a painting by Sesshu, 1496, the Japanese monk Sesshu Toyo, who died 1506. And it shows Bodhidharma's disciple, Hui Ke, who has just cut off his left forearm and presents it to his master to demonstrate his sincerity that he wants to become his disciple. I don't think this is done today, is it? There's another, just to show you a Chinese example. Liang Kai, around 1200, also painted this subject. Now, on Bodhidharma's wall, there were no characters engraved. There's no talk about characters engraved on the wall in front of which Bodhidharma meditated. But to engrave characters here, that was an innovation of the Shandong monks. And we know Bodhidharma is a somewhat nebulous figure, but his disciple Hui Ke is well known in history. And we know that he had come to the city of Ye in 534, where he became famous as a teacher of meditation. And this inscription at Hongdingshan, which I showed, was made in the 560s, and then Ye was the capital of the northern Qi dynasty to which this area belonged, and Hui Ke was still alive. So it's often, as we know, it's often instructive to understand a text or an engraved text if we read what follows after that text, the passage which follows but which is not engraved. And in the sentence that follows after this engraved passage of the Prajnaparamita, the Buddha instructs the practitioner on how to meditate. And he says here, good men, good women, if you want to enter the single practice absorption, this is the repeated and single-minded invocation of the name of the Buddha. You must choose a site which is void and vacant, discard perturbing thoughts, do not take in shapes of attributes. That is, here attributes, that means, I think, refers to figures, to icons. So you don't look at Buddhist figures as you can often do when you meditate, but here you only look at characters. And you fix your mind on a single Buddha and merely recite his name. Now, this is, again, the digital reconstruction in the person who sits here, meditates on this, and that if he turns his eye to the left, he can see these Buddha names. And here is one of them, Darshan Yenpo, the Buddha Great Mountain Cliff, and there are others. So if he wants to turn his mind on a Buddha name in his meditation, he finds them, 21 of them actually. So I think, I mean, we can discuss this later. Some Chinese scholars don't believe me or other people who say that this is for meditation. But I'm very much influenced by a Japanese scholar, Kiriya Seiichi, who proposed the idea that these inscriptions were served for meditation. And the arguments which I just mentioned, I think, make it very likely that this was the case. And we know, of course, about other meditation caves here in contemporary. Hui Ke at Ye was meditation master Seng Chou, who died 560. In this tiny meditation cave at Xiao Nanhai, near the former capital, Ye was hollowed out for him, and after their master's death in 560, the disciples recorded inside Actually outside, I think, outside. They recorded in an inscription that two Buddhas once visited Sengzhou, who was meditating inside the cave. That means Sengzhou visualized them in meditation. And in the area where we are talking about, this is Silishan, there is also such a small cave, not as nicely engraved as Xiaonanhai, but it is very similar in shape. And this cave, people believe, was also used for meditation. Now, I come to the third part, moving mountains. So far we have seen two ways, or two paths to save the world. One is letting the power of the Buddha emanate over the land from mountain tops, and another is a personal contribution, meditating in secluded places. I hope that this is also one way of saving the world. Could be. We can talk about this. Now, I come to the third part of my lecture, moving mountains. This is the Vulture Peak in central India. And the Buddha taught several sutras here, among them the celebrated Lotus Sutra. Now, it's not clear why this peak is called Vulture Peak. According to the eminent translator Kumarajiva, he talks about this and he says he doesn't know. The name could either refer to the shape of the mountain or to the fact that vultures were pervasive there because their corpses were deposited in a nearby grove. But in this photograph, I cannot detect any similarity with the vulture. And people have not seen vultures there for a long time, I think. So we don't really know why it is called Vulture Peak, but the Chinese people, Chinese monks from Shandong, they saw a Vulture Peak in their own country. I'm sorry? This is, and they saw it here on Mount Gang. Mount Gang. You walk up Mount Gang from here, and then this is the top of Mount Gang. And as you walk here, I show you a picture what the scene looks like this. And the Chinese recognized a vulture here. And this, sorry. This is the vulture. I mean, it looks pretty vulture-like, doesn't it? And the Chinese monks probably never saw the real Vulture Peak in India. They didn't go there, so that was an advantage for them. They could recognize the vulture in their own country. And this is another vulture. Even here, you see these two blocks here. They look like these feathered legs of the bird. Now, engraved on this rock here is the beginning of a sutra, the Sutra Guanwu Liangshu Jing, the visualization of the Buddha of immeasurable life, and this translated by Kalyasas in 424. And this sutra was preached by the Buddha on Vulture Peak. And he just says in the first sentence, thus I have heard, once the Buddha dwelt on Mount Gurudakuta, which is Vulture Peak in the city and so on of Rajagaha. And so there can be no doubt that the Chinese engravers, monks who did this engraving, thought that this is Vulture Peak. Now, if we compare the Indian Vulture Peak and the Chinese Vulture Peak, then this is a very interesting methodological issue. I mean, to transfer mountains from one place to another, or even not mountains only, churches or relics or whatever, this is very ubiquitous phenomenon in religion, generally speaking. And moving mountains is particular. I mean, for example, the seat of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Pottalaka, is transferred from India to Mount Putor, east of Ningbo, as well as to Naksan temple in Korea. And in Japan too, one meets various vulture peaks in various sacred geographies. Sometimes it's said to have been literally flown from India to Japan. Mount Hiei, northwest of Kyoto, has habitually been equated with Vulture Peak. Now, when speaking about Vulture Peak in their own country, Japanese medieval texts like to quote this sentence here, which refers to Shakyamuni's preaching of the Lotus Sutra. That assembly of numinous mountain is truly present and has not yet dispersed. So, in a certain sense, this is a more real Vulture Peak. But let's just say the concordance between the original mountain, the original Vulture Peak, and the replica in China rests on three kinds of similarities. That is name, shape, and function. The name, Vulture Peak, is engraved here. We talked about this. And with regard to shape, a complete identity is not required, only a likeness that appears convincing to the viewer, as I showed here. The shape is really otherwise not comparable. But very important is the similarity in function. And this function here in both cases is grounded in the presence of the Buddha. He was brought, the Buddha was brought to Mount Gang in this text. And just as he came himself to Vulture Peak in India. And so his Buddha's presence here on Mount Gang was certainly enlivened or reinforced and confirmed by liturgy, but we don't know anything about this liturgy. But things must have happened there. Things must have happened. But between these two, still there's one crucial difference, and that is the aesthetic dimension. The replica here is designed anew and thereby enriched aesthetically by writing, with this engraved calligraphy. And this is one of the important role of the calligraphy of writing on mountains. The 6th century monks, Shandong monks, created aesthetic spaces or entities. They gave shape to the natural environment and they transformed it into a sacred landscape. Whereas here in India, this is just a natural rock and it has not been changed by men. So these Chinese mountains, in a way, are aesthetically more ambitious and more sophisticated than their Indian prototypes. And here, this is just one last view of Vulture Peak at dawn. And I still come to a second example of moving mountains. On a larger scale, the entire Mount Gang represents an Indian mountain, Mount Malaya, in the city of Lanka, where the Buddha preached the Sutra of Arrival in Lanka. And this opening passage of the Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, describes the ravishing scenery of Mount Malaya, and this description is spread on Mount Gang over 32 boulders and cliffs with a total area of maybe 1 square kilometer. You can see here is a part of and then it continues here, and then it continues here, and so on. 32 boulders. And as you walk up the mountain, you come from one to the next, and you read this description of the Mount Malaya, and you feel yourself you are on Mount Malaya, and you're approaching the area or the spot where the Buddha preaches. Now, we could call this land art. And this, how did the people get this idea, the monks in Shandong? How did they get this idea? Well, the names of some of the patrons and of the monks which are engraved, there are not many, unfortunately, but these people who transformed the Shandong mountains with their inscriptions, many of them, or quite a number of them, were of non-Han ethnic background. They came from the West. They were people from the steppe. And they may have contributed this idea of land art in the open air. I mean, because they were used to life outside. And this is just one example of 5th century of a nobleman in the Northern Way, 5th century tomb. And there is some activity outside. And they have these banners, zigzag banners, and they create a space outside and organize the space, and it could also be called a kind of land art, if you want, actually like Christo's land art. Now, so far we have seen the sutras engraved on rock, how they transformed space through propaganda, through meditation and as land art, and saved the world for him. I mean, for the Buddha. But even before these engravings were made, the believers already knew that Buddha was residing in these mountains. This is the sculpture of a Buddha head in the Riedberg Museum in Switzerland, and it dates from the same time as our inscription, second half 6th century, from the Northern Qi period, and you can see that the Buddha resides in these mountains. Yes, you agree, don't you? Okay, now we come to the next issue, the time. And first we start about the present world age. Our world age is defined by the fact that it is the age of the historical Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, and that he has already left us. This state of affairs was ever on the mind of the Buddhists, and some of their inscriptions are dated accordingly. For example, here on Hongdingshan, the engraving says 1,623 years after Shakyamuni was under the Shwala trees, I mean the twin trees under which he entered Nirvana. And there are many computations when this actually was, but one which was quite common was that this date here, 1623, is 556. Now, the Buddhists at that time and often lament the fact that they were born too late and that they could not see the Buddha personally. But the Buddha survives, even if he has already gone into Nirvana, he survives in his teachings. And this dichotomy of on the one hand, the Buddha being already in Nirvana, but on the other hand, his teachings still being in this world, is the theme of the greatest Buddhist precinct in Sichuan. And here we leave Shandong. We have been in Shandong so far, now we go to Sichuan. And here we see the grove of the reclining Buddha, Wofuyuan in Anyue County, which is dominated by this colossal statue, about 23 meters long, representing the Buddha at the moment that he's about to enter Nirvana. Now, many of the large Buddhist precincts in Asia center on one or several colossal statues of the Buddha. Of course, we all know Bamiyan, blown up by the Taliban in 2001, and in East Asia, Those statues mostly show the Buddha standing or sitting, such as here in Kamakura, dated 1248. Colossal statues of the reclining Buddha are more common in South and Southeast Asia. In East Asia, one finds them in the back of caves and only rarely in the open as in the grove, as we just saw. Yet what makes the grove really unique is not only the colossal statue of the reclining Buddha, but the fact that this statue is matched by the colossal text of the Nirvana Sutra, which has more than 300,000 characters. And this combination of statue and text turns the entire valley into a giant shrine of Nirvana. This is the map of this shrine, and the Buddha statue is here, and flashing here is cave 1 and 2 with the Lotus Sutra. But the most caves are here on the opposite side of this valley, and they are marked in yellow. The caves which are have this, for example, this cave is 59 and 66, and these yellow caves have engraved sutras in them. And here in this caves flashing 59 and 56, the monks began engraving the Nirvana Sutra. This is 59, this is 66, and this is the ground plan. We are still in the process of make a neater drawing. This is a field drawing sketch we did in the field, but you can see 59, 66. And in cave 59, the monks started here, and then they went around and around. And here they started with the Nirvana Sutra. But when they had come to chapter number 4, scroll number 4, here, roughly here, they stopped, or they interrupted. And a lay donor in 735 gave money to engrave another sutra. And they took the money and engraved the other sutra. And the other sutras, actually 2, are excerpts from texts on meditation. And meditation was at that time hotly debated in monastic life, and certainly also here in the Grove. And in 724, the Emperor Xuanzong promulgated an edict questioning the value of meditation. He said, for example, that if monks only meditate, they don't really qualify as monks. They have to know so and so many things by heart. I mean, just to show that they were really serious, not only sitting there and meditating. But then in cave 66, the monks took up the Nirvana Sutra again, and they carved and carved and carved and carved. And they carved about 60,000 characters in this cave alone. That's a really large cave. Normal caves have only around 35,000 characters. The cave 1 and 2 of the Lotus Sutra, which I mentioned, are such normal caves. The Lotus Sutra has about 70,000 characters. Now, so we have here 33,000 characters. 1/10 of the Nirvana Sutra was carved here in 59, and then we have another 60,000 carved in 66, scrolls 5 to 11, and that left some 241,000 characters to be engraved. Now, where would they be engraved? This is, you see flashing here. We just saw 59, 66, and here 3 caves preceding those 2, flashing. And these 3 caves could have lent themselves for this enormous amount of the Nirvana Sutra. This is this view here, these 3 caves. This is cave 59, and this is the ground plan, cave 59, and these 3 caves. And we made calculation, actually, yeah, this cave 46 and cave 51 each contain parts, small parts of the Nirvana Sutra, but not at all the large amount. But we made a calculation in the wall area of all these caves combined is 941,949 square centimeters. And the total surface of the field of script in cave 66, which is here to the left, is about 201,000 square centimeters. So if the carvers would have filled these three caves in the same density in which they carved here in 66, they could have finished the Nirvana Sutra. They could have accommodated 270,000 characters, and this would have been more than to finish the entire sutra. I'm sorry. Yeah. Professor Blum of Berkeley is translating the Nirvana Sutra, and he is actually contributing an article to our volume on which we are working now on the Nirvana Sutra, and he will also discuss the question why they didn't finish the Nirvana Sutra. Now, this character of the grove of this reclining Buddha as a mortuary shrine is also apparent in the architecture of these caves. The monks in Sichuan did not adopt the type of architecture of Buddhist caves that was common in the large Buddhist precincts in the north, like in Yungang, Xiangshan, Dunhuang, and so on, with these elaborate rooms with antechambers, often a central pillar, and always with sculptures, many sculptures. The caves in Sichuan were very simple, just square boxes. I'm sorry, I don't. Just square boxes like this one here. And the walls were engraved here. The walls were engraved with these characters. This is just a random example. Now these simple boxes, it's a very sober architectural form. This has antecedents in Sichuan, in the rock tombs. And I show here some rock tombs of the Han Dynasty. Both types of rock chambers, I mean these tombs and the sutra caves, are carved into vertical walls. They have square entrance surrounded by stepped reveals or jambs, and the ground plans differ, but this I'm not talking about now. But this is also amazing in Sichuan. Normally you bury tombs underground all over the world. You bury the dead under the ground. But here these tombs are in this cliff wall, and they not only remain visible, but they also accessible. I mean, in some special occasion, I mean, not easily accessible, but in some special occasion, you can put up a ladder and go back and visit the inside of the tomb. And this also is the same in the sutra caves. The sutra caves we saw, I think, were also not accessible every day. You wouldn't go there every day, but you could go if you wanted to and look at the texts engraved on the walls, like these caves which we saw. Now, in addition to this design and the location on the cliff, these tombs and the sutra caves have a similar function, or they're comparable also. Their function is comparable. They are both house bodies. The caves, bodies of the tombs, bodies of deceased ancestors, and here the body of the Buddha in the form as manifested in his sutras. So would say the grove of the reclining Buddha helps to save our eon when the Buddha, after the Buddha has left the world, but the world age, our world age, has not yet come to an end. And just to show another, this whole area has 120 caves and the grove, and some are beyond this lake, and we have to go by boat and go inside there and look at the take photographs of the rubbing of the engravings. And we have these huge rubbings of one wall, and we use a crane which movie companies use, and we have somebody taking a photograph from above and taking these from the rubbings from above. But of course, when we take many more detailed photographs, and we go and take all these photographs, very detailed photographs. So, but this is just an overview, so we know where the detailed photographs have to go. Now, I come to the last part, which is the future world age. People, these Buddhists also try to save not only our world age, but even the future world age. But in order to discuss this issue, we have to go back again 2 centuries in a less secular age than we saw here in Sichuan, the 8th century. We go back to the 6th century, and you all know that at that time Buddhists were convinced that our world is soon heading for final collapse. For example, in the colophon of Mount Tie, which we saw before, one reads, knowing that the vast horses of heaven have long been deficient and discerning that the earth's pivot is near collapse, they sighed that yet the great blue sea also changes, and bemoaned that even Mount Tai falls. But after the apocalypse, sometime in the future, a new eon will dawn. Men in that world age should and will want to know about the teachings of the Buddha. They will be able to read them engraved on stones, and the stones will have survived the days of doom, because from now on, when this engraved text encounters the inferno at the end of the eon, it will not be consumed. When its divine something faces those scorching winds, it will forever abide. Now, I wonder, and maybe you can help me on this point in the discussion also, I wonder whether just by carving these sutras into the rock, the monks could stave off the apocalypse for a while. Maybe it helped to put it further back into the future, but I'm not sure. But the most gigantic project in this vein is, of course, the Cloud Dwelling Monastery here near Beijing. We have to go to this area now. There in 616, a monk, Jingwan, who died in 631, endeavored to carve not only parts of one sutra, as on Mount Tie, but to entire Buddhist scriptures for the next world age. And this is Stone Sutra Mountain, where he worked. If you go up here and you pass this cave, and this cave close to the ridge here has stone doors, but these doors have no locks. These doors cannot be opened. And if they should remain closed until the next world age comes, sometime way in the future. But if you would be able to, or if you look through these slits in the doors, you see inside the whole cave is filled to the brim with stones, slabs engraved with sutras. And here are more caves up there, and they are protected by these overhanging rocks. And these rocks give protection from meteors that will fall from heaven in the days of doom and burn everything. And the floods also, which come in the days of doom, in the apocalypse, maybe they cannot come up that far, 400 meters. It's about 400 meters above sea level. And even if the fires if they come, they may not destroy the sutras inside, which are the sutra stones which are protected inside the mountains. And actually, even during the Cultural Revolution, nobody took the trouble to come up all this way and then open these caves and smash the stones. It's just too cumbersome, too laborious. So the stones were safe even during the Cultural Revolution. So this monk Jingwan was quite foresight. Now this monk he writes about what he wants to do, and here is a replica of a inscription which he wrote, and it's now here at the right side of this lintel, and this is the rubbing. It is also broken, but we have a later Yuan Dynasty copy of this, and then it tells us the entire text. And the text reads, "The true law of Shakyamuni Tathagata and the counterfeit law have together already endured for more than 1500 years, now in the second year of the Zhenguan era." This is here, Urnian, Zhenguan Urnian. Now in the Zhenguan Urnian, in the second year of the Zhenguan era, which is 628, we have been immersed in the decline of the law, Morfa, for 75 years. He said, here you can see Fa, Morfa, for 75 years. The sun of the Buddha has already set, the dark night is deep indeed, blind are all sentient beings, and they have consequently lost their guidance. To preserve the true law, to preserve the true law, to preserve the true law, Jingwan has led his followers, his friends, and those who like to give alms to come to this mountain ridge and engrave the Flower Garland Sutra and the other texts in the 12 divisions in the hope that in a distant world age humankind may be saved and that all clergy and lay people may together ascend to true enlightenment. When Jingwan says 628, in 628 we have been immersed in the decline of the law for 75 years, he is referring again to Nanyue Hui's reckoning, who considered that the decline of the law began in 553. Now there are about 5,000 stones in these mountain caves, but another 10,000 stones the monks did not stack into the mountain caves, but they buried them below in the monastery ground. Also, that may have been too laborious to bring them up to the mountain, and the caves were already filled. After 5,000 stones were in, there was no space left. They would have had to excavate new caves, but they didn't do this, but buried them in the mountain, in the monastery grounds. And there they were excavated in 1958 and put on these racks like books. But 40 years later, in 1999, they were put back again under the ground. So you cannot study them any longer. They are gone, and they are underground. And they are stacked on one on top of the other, so it's impossible to look at them. Only the topmost maybe you can see. So Jingwan and his followers were serious in their endeavor to save the world, when after half a millennium in 1180, they finished their work. Around 1180, they finished the work. They had engraved 31 million characters. And that was the largest epigraphic project in world history and the most heroic attempt to save the world of the future. Thank you.
Would you be willing to take some questions?
Of course. I want to learn.
So why did they bury these stone sutras they found again?
You mean in 1999?
Yes.
Yeah, this was a big fight between the Fortiao Xiehui, the Buddhist Association of China, Zhao Buchu, who wanted to bury them because this was the original idea. I mean, they should be buried underground and maybe for the next world age. But the Godia Wonwutju, the protection agency for protection of cultural monuments, was not happy, and there was a sort of a kind of fight. But the Fortia Sierre prevailed, and then in 1999 they put it underground. But the scholars, especially Godia Wonwutju and scholars, are still unhappy, and they hope to resurrect them someday. I mean, for us it's also awful because we cannot study them.可以。
我浏览了您的《万物》这本著作的开端的文章，就是磨着汉字。就中国的汉字呢，现在学者都认为最早是甲骨文，但是最近10年呢，在山东发现了一种新的文字，比甲骨文又早了1100多年。距今大概有8300年，这个文字现在被定名为刻骨文。我不知道雷德福先生这本书里是否接触过这个。
我听说过，有这个发现的，但是老实说，我还不太相信这个资料，我还不太相信。我跟人家谈过，山东人当然他们很高兴、很骄傲，有这个机会，他们的这个文字这么老，这么久，但是他们给我看这个情况嘛，好像找到的地方也是在河里面还是水里面，所以潍坊是个昌子，所以这个考古的情况也不一定是可靠的，所以我们还应该多做一点研究嘛。
You're allowed to ask a question. I could add another language by speaking German, but I sound not very English.
Well, I try to.
Would it be very difficult to go back to the picture of the Nirvana Buddha?
Not at all. No.
Because it would be easier if I saw it again to ask the question.
Yes. Very. Yeah. Here we are.
In 20 years ago, I would have asked you if your slide is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Why is he lying on his left side? And this, he shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But
I think there are more examples, but very rare.
very rare.
Very unusual.
Very rare. And people have really wrecked their head. Why is this? And I mean, one explanation has again to do with feng shui, with this geomancy. But whether, because in this valley, he is sort of facing. If his head would be here, he would be facing down the valley, and that may not be, in terms of geomancy, not so auspicious. That's one explanation, but in fact, there has not been a satisfying explanation. And as since we talk about this whole statue has problems. One is, if you look at this here and then the legs come in a slight angle. They are not straight. They go down, and this also these what is it called, Babu Lungshan, they don't belong to the iconography of the reclining Buddha. So this part must probably later, and even the legs may have been later.
I have another problem.
Yeah.
If I see that correctly, the Buddha should have his right hand under his cheek, laying down.
Yeah.
But what I see,
Yeah.
it's a standing Buddha.
Yes, just
Turned.
turned, toppled. Yes, 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 yes. There are problems.
Very strange.
Very strange, and even some people have even questioned the date. But I mean, most Chinese scholars, and me too, from the style of the face, it looks like 8th century. It's like it's one design. This statue and the caves, but this is a bit disconcerting. So it may be the statue only in the beginning went up to here. The problem with Sichuan is I once remember talking to Su Bai, the grand old man in Buddhist archaeology in China, and he said, if you go to Sichuan, it's very difficult because there are no records. There you don't have records, not enough records, not enough inscriptions. So we don't know. There is no contemporary, hardly any contemporary record about these sculptures. Very few colophones, but not in detail. Yeah.
Quick question. Here you see candles and
Yeah.
offering to the image. Do you have evidence of
We
offering?
paid for it.
You paid for it? But anyway,
we got these candles. We got them from the lady who sells the candles. But to answer your question, we were not the only one.
no, but that's not my question. My question is, do you see evidence of offering to text, of offering to the inscriptions in Shandong or elsewhere?
That's a very good question. No, they mostly offered to statues. That's a very good question. I mean, of course, there is this famous picture of the character, four gigantic character of Buddha, and there are candles in front, and people paying obeisance. But here in the caves, in where you have the caves with the texts and you have the caves with the figures, I think they mostly or exclusively put candles in front of figures. That's a very interesting question. Yeah, here, I mean, you can buy these, of course, and we bought them, and then I asked our photographer to make a nice picture with these candles. Yes?
I have a few questions about Shandong.
Yeah.
Could you speak a bit about who is sponsoring this extraordinary project?
Yeah, yeah.
Who is giving permission?
Yeah, yeah.
And who is the calligraphy? Can you talk a bit about the calligraphy? It's very distinctive.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, who is sponsoring the project? There are basically 3 levels. We have the very simple common people who are not known otherwise, and they give small money, or they sponsor. They are mentioned in colophones. Then the second level is higher up officials and many military people, and also many women. They give. They donate money, and then the highest level is the imperial house. But we have only one faint, or no, not faint, but only one connection to the imperial house. Huli Wudu is one man who gave a, who is mentioned in the colophon, and he was connected to the imperial house. So we have these 3 levels, whether there is a development towards more involvement of the imperial house is hard to say. Now, your second question was who gives the permission, right? Yeah, this is, we just don't know. I mean, we just don't know, and of course somebody must have given the permission, and it's a very intriguing question, like today in Taishan. I mean, there we have in Taishan, these colophones even are written today, and there are I think there are 2 types of writers. One is they ask the local authorities today, I mean the Wenwuju or whoever is responsible for the Taishan today, they ask and they have to pay money to be allowed to do this. But more common is that the local authorities ask somebody to engrave something. Like Gomo-ro is a famous example. Gomo-ro came and they said, please, Gomo-ro, write us a poem and we'll engrave it. So it cuts both ways. We still hope when we have finished our project we can engrave some inscriptions, but we will belong to the category who has to pay. But the question is, I mean, you asked who gives permission, and I think, or what this, your third question, I forgot. I think that by making these engravings, like on Gangshan, and they singled out this site to make these engravings of sutras, I think this had also an ecological dimension. By doing this, they created a sphere which is somehow sacrosanct. I mean, you cannot, if you have these wonderful stones with Buddha text or so, you're not supposed to go there and whatever, build houses or have any activities which are not sacred or not venerable, I mean, impolite, so to speak. And I think there must have been something like a protection, ecological protection of these. But you had a third?
About the calligraphy.
Ah, yeah, the calligraphy. Yeah. This is there is one man called Zheng Andao-yi, and Zheng Andao-yi is obviously he's mentioned 3 or 4 times in different places and different sites, and in Tieshan he is even talked about, and in the colophon, which I showed several times, I mean of 579, they talk about his style of his calligraphy, and this is a very interesting assessment of this writer, of the colophon, anonymous writer, assessment of Zheng Andao-yi's calligraphy, and he says there is Wang Xizhi, Wang Xianzhi, and then there is Zhong Yu and Wei Dan, and we know. And these are known from history. I mean, Han Dynasty and Western Jin calligraphers, famous calligraphers. But actually, yeah, and the colophon writer says, but Zheng Andao-yi surpassed them all. And this is a bold statement. But it means not only aesthetically he surpassed them, but he surpassed them in terms of large writing on rocks. This is something which Wang Xizhi tradition didn't do or couldn't do or didn't want to. And this colophon writer says, but our Zheng Andao-yi, he could do this. And he wrote on rocks. And of course, when you write on rocks, you cannot write in Wang Xizhi's small kaishu. So there must be a different style. But where this style comes from is, I have often asked my Chinese colleagues, and say, who was the teacher of Zheng Andao-yi? They don't know, of course. We don't know. But there is a famous assessment by Kang Youwei. And Kang Youwei in the 19th century, end of 19th century, writes about a Taishan. And he says these characters in Taishan, also 50 centimeters high and large, so I mean on the rock, he says these are the ancestors of the writing big characters on tablets, on temple halls. And to write on temple halls, you have these big characters, and these characters are like this. And they are the same size as the Taishan, so it's quite reasonable to say this. Which comes first, or which is first, I don't know. Maybe I can find, or somebody can enlighten me on this point. But we know, of course, that in the 3rd century already, or in the Han Dynasty probably, people were writing these big tablets. And this was a special type of calligraphy. I mean, you had to write big characters in a special technique and so on. So there is this connection.
Are you a Buddhist or?
No, not yet.
What made you so motivated to study these things?
Oh, it's so wonderful. It's such a wonderful material, isn't it?
Material?
I mean, such wonderful objects to,
Objects.
I mean,
Aesthetic.
aesthetically, historically, intellectually, it's so many deep thoughts. It's fantastic. Yeah. But I mean, maybe if I study another 30 years, I may become a Buddhist.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just have a couple comments. I want to add to Professor Hartman's comments about the Nirvana scene
Yes.
here. We do have an image at a sculpture in Dunhuang,
Yes.
one of the lesser known caves, not
Yes,
the
yes.
main Bar Nirvana cave.
Yes.
But he's also facing on his left side. And second, the Tieshan colophon. You mentioned that it says that this colophon will not be destroyed at the end of the Kalpa. Was that the
Pardon?
Tieshan colophon that
Yeah.
says that it won't be destroyed by the
Yeah.
great destruction of fire? So this sounds to me like Ashwagosha writing about how the Buddha's relics cannot be destroyed by the fire at the end of the Kalpa. And I'm wondering if there's something, in the same way that mountains are moved from India to China, by inscribing this on a mountain, can that somehow move the mountain from this realm to the highest Brahma realm
Yeah,
to
yeah.
avoid destruction?
Yeah,
of
that's a
someone?
very nice idea, that the relics cannot be destroyed and these scriptures cannot be destroyed. The quest or the hope, almost desperate hope perhaps, of men to have something which which stays forever. And the analogy to the relics, I haven't thought of this. Very good, thank you. I will think this is a good idea. About your first question about
Just to point out that in Dunhuang we also
Dunhuang, yeah. This is certainly true. I mean, there are reclining Buddhas, several actually in Dunhuang, but the main difference seems to be that these are really up. This one is in the open. It's seen from afar. I mean, it's the giant statue defining this whole valley, whereas in Dunhuang they are in the back of the cave, and many reclining Buddhas are in Kizil and other places. They are in the back of caves, behind the central pillar.
Yeah, and the one at Dunhuang that's on the left side, lying on its left side instead of lying on its right
That's
side.
normal.
It's on the northern wall, not on the back wall, which is also
Right.
strange.
Right, yeah. But to have it in such a prominent position as a colossal figure, I think comparable to these colossal figures in Bamiyan or whatever I showed. This is maybe unique. Yes?
So the carvings made to save the future world, do they ever mention Maitreya?
Yes, he will come and give his 3 sermons. Yes, he is mentioned. Yes.
I was wondering if there, just a quick question, are there pre-Buddhist examples of this practice of engraving scripture passages on mountain?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are pre-Buddhist there are prototypes, and the immediate prototypes are Taoist. And there are 3 mountains in Shandong further to the east, I mean, from there, Tianzhushan, Yunfengshan, and some else. Anyway, around 509 to 511, 50 years before the Buddhists start, there are Taoist inscriptions or inscriptions with a Taoist flavor, let's say, and written by Zheng Daozhao, who was a sympathizer of Taoism. And it's very comparable in that it is on mountains and high on mountains, and that these also seem to have served meditation. And there is even these terms. It says something like Yenshi, or meditation chamber, and in this text, so there is this parallel. But the main difference to the Buddhists is that these are not Taoist sacred texts. They don't engrave the whatever Taoist text, but they just have a kind of Taoist flavor. And so there was obviously, I think, there must have been a competition between the Taoists and the Buddhists. And the Buddhists said, well, the Taoists are not bad what they did, but now we do it here more further in the West, and we do it on a grand scale. And so there was and the biggest prize, of course, was Mount Tai, Taishan. And whoever could write on Mount Tai just had the could say, well, now we have written on Mount Tai. And the Buddhists did this, unfortunately we don't know the date, but somehow around 580 or some in this area, they engraved the largest Buddhist sutra on 2,000 square meters. I mean, and to do this was, and on the southern side actually, they had started, Buddhists, with monasteries on the northern side, small monasteries, and then suddenly they went to the southern side, which is the sort of the facade where the emperors went up. And there they put their Diamond Sutra. So there is a competition between Taoists and Buddhists and later Confucians. Yes.
Yeah, I think you hinted at this my question already, but let me ask anyway. So why Shandong?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question again. I mean, one simple reason, but this is by far not the only, is that the stone is so good. The stone lends itself. I mean, it's this granite stone, and these wonderful empty spaces of rock. But why Shandong? Difficult. I mean, as I said, it's Northern Qi, and the Northern Qi were a foreign, so-called foreign dynasty, and they may have had this habit of having activities in the open or living in the open, and I mean from their background, steppe background. But again, this is not sufficient as an explanation. I don't know. Yeah, there are many things we cannot find a straight answer.
Maybe on that note, our speaker arrived yesterday from Germany, so what is it, 4:30 in the morning?
Yes,
Maybe
yes.
we tortured you long enough and let you go, but not before we thank you one more time.
Yeah, no, just one thing. It just comes back to my mind. Why Shandong? Sorry.
4:30 in the morning.
Why Shandong? One reason is the Qin Huangdi had already carved on the mountains in Shandong. There was this tradition. Yeah. Okay. Now.
We can thank you.